So hi guys, during last decade, the 2010s, I did actually start reading works by Stephen King. Before that, I only had uh, one connection with him, and that was by watching The Shining by Stanley Kubrick. It was one of the most terrifying horror movies I've seen, at least at that point. So in 2012, between 2012 and 2013, I did actually start reading Carrie, and uh, essentially back then, if you don't know, Carrie is Stephen King's first novel, and I felt like, yeah, I will start reading his works in chronological order, which I actually dropped. Essentially, what happened is I've read Carrie, I enjoyed it, and then I actually at this point got some Stephen King's books, and and essentially felt like, all right, I got Salem's Lot and Misery and stuff like that, but I'm still going in chronological order. So I tried going from Carrie to The Shining. Salem's Lot, and for whatever reason, I did not really get that much into Salem's Lot. So it few years went by, and then in 2017, I felt, what the hell, I'm picking up Misery, which is one of the books I got in 2013. So I read it, and I felt it was pretty good. Um, Another few months went by, and then I picked up The Shining, which I listened as an audiobook. After Shining, I got Pet Cemetery. I've started reading the Dark Tower series, which I finished last year. And then essentially, apart from rereading the Carrie last year, which I actually did twice in the beginning and the end of the year, I essentially have not read anything by Stephen King. So now I actually picked up 10 books, well, 11, but 10 books, which I want to really read this year. So, first up, um, honorable mention. Let's see. Yeah, it is actually the book I'm currently reading, and when I compiled this list, it is actually 12 books technically, but yeah. Um, so those are 10 books which I want to read this year. Those are not necessarily only books by Stephen King. I feel I will probably read, and it may happen that I won't read all of them, but those are the books I would like to have read by the end of 2020. Of course, I may change my mind in the future, but so those are not like set in stone full on plan. I don't like planning TBRs and stuff like that because I just like going spontaneously to just pick up the book and read it. So essentially, the book I'm currently reading, it's an honorable mention. It is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which is his book from 1999. It is short here, as you can see, and I'm not actually reading this copy. This is my Swedish copy, but I actually am reading an English version in on as an ebook. So I am around 50-60 pages in on the fourth chapter, and I enjoy it. I must say, it's nothing. What you expect. It's a short story, a short book by Stephen King about a girl who got lost in the woods, and I don't know if it's a spoiler. Just give me see. I don't know if it's a spoiler actually, but there is something going on in the story itself in the woods. So it's basically pretty vague description, but yeah, especially I get maybe not necessarily all that the same connection, but it reminds me in a way of Gwendy's Bottom Box, a bit shorter story, which is you know which is about a teenage or preteen girl. Um, yeah, it's also have this short vibe. It's barely for 300 pages. So yeah, if you want some quick read, I actually would say I recommend it so far, at least. So if we get going with my main list, and actually at this point I will show you two books, and those two books are essentially. Give me a second. I have realized I have forgotten to pick up one book, but yeah. So in this case, I am fine either way. If you look at my Goodreads, only one of those books is listed there, but I'm essentially fine either way if I read one of those. Those are pretty much on the same level for me as how much I want to read it. So yeah, it's either Cujo and Cujo is actually listed, but thinking about it now, I feel like I would like to read Dolores Claiborne a bit more, and there's another book in on this list. Actually, you know what? I will give you the next book as well. So those are not in order, by the way. So it's not like those two I want to read like the least of the list, but I'm just picking them up as conveniently as I feel please. So just so you know, it's no particular order. I know because I want also to read Gerald's Game, and I have heard that there's a connection between Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne. So I would actually kind of like to read those back to back in similar way as I will read Regulators and Desperation. Those two novels I will basically read back to back. So yeah, I'm more leaning towards to Dolores Claiborne at this point, but if I think Claiborne came out first, if I read the Dolores Claiborne, then I'm most likely picking up Gerald's Game as well. So essentially one of those, I would say essentially one of those three, I'm definitely reading. So there we go. Cujo is accidentally one of the earliest Stephen King books I own as well. So there we go. And again, essentially, this one is not that longer than The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Essentially, I might actually do a readathon with this one, or like doing like a weekend, because yeah, I will basically read it in maybe not one day, but bit over one day. So I might take 2 weekends, so to say, and relax. First weekend with Dolores Claiborne, and then the other one with Gerald's Game. Whatever. Let's move on. Another one is similar period. I think it's the first full original novel of the 90s, which Stephen King released. I don't remember really. It is The Needful Things. Actually, this and the Dolores Claiborne edition I picked them up at the same time, and I actually found those two in a secondhand shop, really cheap. I think the Needful Things was like 20 or 25, and another 20 was for Dolores Claiborne. So it was really good deal. Those are not necessarily like full-on first editions, but it's the Viking edition. So yeah, and I didn't get a summary for those previous books. I will try to do my best with the next ones actually. But about this one, let's say it takes place in Castle Rock. It's supposed to be the last Castle Rock story, but if you look at the Gwendy's Button Box, for instance, you know how well it turned out. It's basically, well, maybe not as bad as that, but it's bit remind me of Friday the 13th, the final chapter, when we don't know that the fourth movie wasn't the last one. And then we got a show and so on, yeah. So, moving on, there is also, I mean, those books are essentially quite low on my list. I think reading Dolores Claiborne, Needful Things, and Gerald's Game pretty close to each other would be a nice marathon. But next one is newer work by him. I think like one of the newest ones. Yeah, I haven't really read that much of the new Stephen King books, and Joyland looks promising. I ordered this version from last year. It's illustrated edition, and I cannot really tell you like the. I can't really give you detailed descriptions about all those books, because, yeah, I know possibly like very basic, like essentially you look at this cover, you can expect, and the title Joyland, you might expect that it's something to do with like a park, amusement park or something like that. I may be way off, but yeah, looking at that cover, and there's a naked lady on the cover with a gun, so maybe she shoots someone. I am hoping that I'm not wrong in that case, but there we go. So let's go forward to actually from the newer to even newer book. It's The Institute, which is his latest work. I, I am not so certain if I will read If It Bleeds. Yeah, I'm picking it up and reading it directly actually. So I'm not putting it on this list because I have all of his work which I want to get through. So his new releases are not as high on my list, but still I want to read it. So it's essentially Stranger Things by Stephen King, from what I've heard, and yeah, I like Stranger Things. I like Stephen King, so yeah, I mean, I actually picked it up either exactly the same day or very closely to a day when it was released. Let's see. Yes, it was 10th of September. So yeah, it was essentially like really, yeah, it was on the release date actually. I went after work. I went and to the store and picked it up. Haven't read it yet, but still, I have it. There we go. Let's move on to two older books, I think, because with all this reading, we have 90s stuff, we have 2010 stuff. I think we should get a bit of 80s stuff as well. Let's start with it is my Swedish edition. I'm not sure if I will be reading this one, or I think I'm leaning at this point mostly into audiobook or even ebook, just as with The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. This actually I have started at one point, and it is the Firestarter, and it's with essentially this, and if we combine this and it, and maybe some examples from other films and so whatsoever, we get Stranger Things. So I enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to reading this one as well. I have seen the film, and I own the film, but I have seen it like long ago, and I don't want to watch it before I've read the book again, or read the book. It is actually one of the earlier ones I had. I did see that I still have I should have a. Well, I don't seem to have it at this point, but I have seen. No, I don't seem to have it now. But it was around 2013 or 2014 when I picked it up. I mean, it is 29 Swedish crowns, so it's basically like $2-3 or around that. So it's pretty cheap. Like in comparison, something like let's say like something like a new copy of Gerald's Game, it would cost 100. So just so you know. All right. Another 80s stuff. That one is pretty high on my list, and it's Christine, about a killer car. or maybe not necessarily critical, but reading the description of the story, I actually am quite interested in picking it up. It seems really interesting, and it's another case. I really want to see the film, but I want to read the book first. So, and I picked this beautiful edition. It's like the new Halloween edition. It's the only one I own. However, I may get a oh no, I do have actually this particular version of Bag of Bones as an ebook. Yeah, but I may actually at some point get this version of. I might even get all of them, but primarily I think like The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, I would like to have it in English. It's like really nice read for weekend. I'm reading it during the week after work and so on, but still. Alright. And that one I will actually. Oh no, actually I will show you another one first. So I want to read Mr. Mercedes, and I am intrigued by the story itself. I had went through Mr. Mercedes Bill Hodges trilogy phase, and I am interested in the whole trilogy essentially, and then Outsider, and essentially I am more so interested in reading this because I want to read this, and then I want to read Outsider, and I want to watch show Outsider, which I don't want to. I mean, so it is essentially me wanting to watch the show, both Mr. Mercedes and then Outsider show, which is currently on, but I don't want to watch Outsider show before I read the book, nor before I watch Mr. Mercedes series. It's tangle of like to bring Doctor Who in reference there. It's basically timey-wimey shit and whatever. Like, just read those 4 books and you'll be fine and watch the shows. So yeah, spoiler: I am not currently watching Outsider on HBO. Yeah, I know. So yeah, I'm actually pretty interested. My mother have read the book, and she says it's pretty good. It's different sort of King, but still, it would be interesting to read it and to get what the fuss is about. Alright, so next to last book, I will actually give you some honorable mentions again, before I get to the first one, but first up, this one. So I did tell you that I have read the Dark Tower series until last year. Yeah, I did read first 7 books, but then I actually left this one for last, which I didn't have to, but I felt like I want to read them in release order. So I still have The Wind Through the Keyhole left to read, and yeah, I am actually saving it for later. I might actually. It's odd with this one. I was actually thinking about waiting until 2012, which will be the 10th 2022, which will be the 10th anniversary of this book, and as well as 40th anniversary of the original version of the Gunslinger book. So I might actually just reread all of them in 2020, like the full series, and just read this one either this year or next year. It's still fine. But by 2022, I want to have read this one. Hopefully this year. So, some honorable mentions, which I want to get to. Which I just realized I have more books right now, because he has written so many. Of course, the next books in the Bill Hodges trilogy, those are on my radar, and then bit more so Outsider. If I feel like Bill Hodges, like I feel like okay, Mr. Mercedes is fine, but I don't really feel like continuing the series itself, I will just pick up Outsider. So preferably I would like to read all of them, but like the Outsider is both Finders Keepers and End of Watch at this point. But I still would actually kind of want to know what happens in those. So again, and I just don't like it. Feels wrong to see an adaptation of a book before reading the book. So and I want to watch the show. It's too complicated. Okay, so yeah, those four books there I put them at one. There's The Talisman, which I actually started reading as well, but for whatever reason I fell out. It was just after I finished the Dark Tower series. Of course, the Black House, I can put it alongside with it. I also want to pick up Eyes of the Dragon. And actually, hold on with this one. So I have actually an older Swedish copy of Eyes of the Dragon, which is full-on fantasy story connected to the Dark Tower series. And actually, I picked it up in a second-hand store, but I think that this cover is pretty neat. It's an old Swedish copy. It looks like this. I really like how like this dragon. It looks pretty creepy, and I like how the eyes light up. Yeah. Um, I actually really like old Swedish or also English or American and British copies, the covers. They have this atmosphere about them. So yeah, like if you look at, I mean, if you look at like the Institute, it's really nice as well. But Dolores Claiborne, or Needful Things, or The Stand, the original version of The Stand has really nice cover. I mean, which apparently has nothing to do with the book, but still. Another one is actually Skeleton Crew. I have not read so much short story collection, and there's one particular story in Skeleton Crew, The Mist, which I want to read, which also is a story which I have read, but it would be a nice change of pace, and actually I might kind of split up this list over 2 years and just put in few short story collections here and there, so to say. Like technically I have read two. I've read, like, it's not even short story collection, it's novella collection. I have read the what's the name, Horse in Atlantis. That one I've read, and I have read, it is not really, but you could count it as a short story collection. The Gunslinger, the Dark Tower book, it was actually really originally written as a full novel, and then it was split in five, or four short stories, and then one was added as a fifth ending when the book was released actually. So I do kind of count it, but not really. And there are some short stories themselves which I have read, like I have read the Children of the Corn, accidentally Night Shift full story short story collection is on my list. So I would just look here. Is there anything else? There are certainly few books which I want to reread. Oh yeah, Insomnia. I want to read it. It's one of my first Kings, and apparently the introduction to the Crimson King. Like you can see that after I finish the Dark Tower, I want still to keep up the books which are connected to it. So I want to read at least every year as long as it's possible, a book which is not connected to the Dark Tower series as well as the one that is connected. It's like, like when, with Marvel Cinematic Universe, we had the main story, the end game, finish off everything, and then we have still some connections there, here and there. Maybe not the same, but still. Right, I think I will. I actually put the food in the oven just before starting filming it, and I am actually feeling myself getting more hungry, and it should be ready by now. So I will just get into the last book, and it is my number one book, which I want at this point. My number one is first finish the Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, but I could essentially skip any of those previous books and be like, fine, I would just read them next year or or year after that. But the one book which I absolutely have to read, and I feel ashamed for not having read it before, I actually started reading it, and I enjoy it immensely. However, I had another commitment which stopped me from reading it, and I just fell off and didn't pick it up again. So the book which I am really looking forward to reading is The Stand. I did actually, going by the point, it was already my number one, like a few months or a few weeks ago. And I actually started reading it. I read the prologue, which I have actually read a couple of times. And I felt like, yeah, this is a huge book, and I want to get into it really much. And I felt like, yeah, I just want to read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. So I am technically currently reading it, but I keep it around. I mean, I still take, even if I'm reading it, not reading it actively, I still want to have it by me, and it's added on my Goodreads. But it's the thing about it is, oh, I want to read The Stand, have it by me. I even have an audiobook, so I can technically sit down and listen to it if I felt like it, but I want to read it, and I might actually wait until I read a couple of books and then just go back into it. I know the prologue really well. It's, I can skip it and just go into the first chapter, which in original version it was the first, like the beginning of the story, so it's fine. And I've read actually the book one, part of it, but it's the continuation, so I might essentially flow through, like even go on full on audiobook with the first book. But here's the thing, I want to read it like a lot, but I don't want to rush it. It's a really huge book, so I want to get all the details, and I don't want to stress with it. So essentially the idea of reading more than one book at once, with this particular book in mind, but taking all, like giving it all when I can, yeah, it feels nice. I don't mind actually finishing it off like at the end of this year, but having read a bit of it throughout. But it's possible that I might just pick it up one weekend and just say, oh yeah, I want to read The Stand, and just fell into the book. It's possible. But I am a slow reader, so yeah, I won't. I am pretty sure I will not finish it during the weekend. Okay, like if I had like 2 weeks off, maybe I would have finished it during those 2 weeks. But it's really long. I don't want to rush it with it. When I rush with books and I feel like I need to finish it, I don't feel I get from the book what I should get. So my number one. And yeah, I already watched like the first episode of the miniseries, which actually is a miniseries which I really want to watch. I recently got it on Blu-ray, and I'm looking forward to watching it. So, yeah. What Stephen King books do you look forward to reading during this year? Are there any particular ones, or just tell me in the comments. See ya.